Welcome to the place where we learn about and learn from the leaders in our field who are powering human creativity. I am Aaron Dworkin, and this is Arts Engines. Thanks again for joining me here on Arts Engines. Today's guest is Christopher Sierra, who serves on the Voice and Master of Music in Music Education faculty at Longy School of Music. Christopher, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Well, so I am so excited to talk with you, and especially because you are a leader not only at Longy, but really nationally when we think about and talk about culturally responsive teaching. And I want to delve into that. It's fascinating. And actually, Longy helped us to co-curate this show as one of our creative partners. So we're really excited. So I thought I would kind of just delve right in. There can definitely be those in our audience who may not exactly know what we're talking about when we say culturally responsive teaching. So I thought first, if you could just kind of share for our audience, what does that mean when we say that?
Well, I think culturally responsive teaching is a little bit challenging to define across the board. One, because I think we don't have or share common pedagogical ground, or I don't think a common definition exists. And so sometimes culturally responsive teaching is mistakenly used in a synonymous way with social justice education or multicultural education. But when we're dealing with culturally responsive teaching specifically, or cultural responsiveness, I think we're thinking about teaching and leading in such a way that more of our students, or the people that we work with or interact with across more of their differences, are achieving at a higher level and engaging at a deeper level. And so there are various things that we can do that inform our cultural responsiveness. We can be culturally competent. That certainly informs our ability to teach and lead in a culturally responsive way. But there's a distinction still, right? Cultural competence is the will and the ability to form authentic and effective relationships across our differences. But when we're thinking about culturally responsive teaching, there are specific principles that enable us to reach our students across their differences. And I'm talking specifically those students that are traditionally underserved in education, underrepresented, from non-dominant narratives.
Right. And before, because I'm very curious, kind of what are these principles, and especially because some in our audience might be like, okay, so now we understand this, we see it, and we want to be able to implement it. But just before we get to that, one of the things that I was hearing, kind of some of what you were sharing, is that this really becomes a heavy focus on students. Is this a very student-centered approach in this?
Absolutely. It's very student-centric, and it takes us away from, it's kind of like, I guess, a paradigm shift from what's been a really teacher-centric, I think, profession for a long time. It's really putting the focus on students, understanding our students in the world and their world, and building connections and relationships accordingly so that we can better reach them, build trust with them, and so that they can be more willing to come on this educational journey when we're in the classroom, and they can be more willing to be challenged with rigor, academic rigor.
So, and, in this day and age, it seems like, there are so many disparate parts of our nation and approaches to many things, including teaching. And so I feel it's always important when we think about these things that are so important to so many of us, that there are those who will ask why. Right? They'll say, why is this so important? Why should we teach this way, et cetera? There are certainly people, if we want to say old school, who are like, I'm the teacher. I should just teach the way I was taught and teach what I was taught to those who I want to teach it to, kind of, right? So I'm just kind of curious, what would you say to the people who say, why should we do this? We understand what it is now, but why is it important?
Culturally responsive teaching is important because I think um, it enables equity to kind of be at the forefront of what we do. It enables everybody to succeed and develop the skills that they need to kind of be successful in the global workforce, if you will, and then be in contributing citizens of the world. And so, I think we know that a thriving populace is an educated populace. And the more that we can educate all of those around us, particularly those people who come from underserved backgrounds or traditionally, again, underrepresented backgrounds in education, we can assure that everyone's doing their part to create environments in the world that are welcoming, where people feel seen, and where at the core of it, we're building relationships that are grounded in love pedagogy. So I think it's important because we want to see everybody succeed and thrive as people, as leaders. And I think it's an important step towards building like a harmonious culture and a deep culture of like harmony, equity, and inclusion.
Absolutely. And ultimately, as you're saying, literally just a better world for all of us to live in, and especially that sense of being inclusive, because so many students come from so many different backgrounds, these days, and especially part of what you shared, just in terms of that each of them are able to engage, are able to succeed, and I think really also feel valued, right? And especially in that sense, from regardless of their background, and coming into especially some of these very big institutional environments that can sometimes seem so cold. And so this is really fascinating and such important work. So I am sure there are those in our audience who are like, okay, this is really interesting. And not only that, I see why this is so needed. And oh my gosh, we need to be doing more of this at our institution. But how on earth can we actually, how do we start? You mentioned, are there some core kind of principles that people should be either thinking about, or foundational elements as they get into this work and this approach?
Yeah, I do believe that. I think it's first important to do what we consider invitational work, and really engage principles that are essentially welcome porch principles that make students across differences feel welcome into the house of learning. We know that students learn best when they feel welcome, and especially those students for whom school has traditionally not worked. And so when we think about invitational work or welcome porch kind of strategies, maybe the first principle that comes to mind is making sure that students understand that we as teachers understand them, and that we have some kind of notion of who they are in their gender, the age group, learning style, religion, and culture. And there's very many ways we can create a situation where students feel like we understand them and get them. We do this via content inclusion, and we can include a situation where we're incorporating multicultural education or programming for diverse composers, and inclusive storytelling in our repertoire for those of us who teach music. We can also do this by creating an environment where students are honored or recognized and seen in their cultural connections to the course content. And we can also create an environment where students are essentially safe to be themselves. We create culture-safe classrooms or imperfect classrooms where students know that it's okay to make mistakes, and it's okay to unapologetically be yourself. So that's definitely like one of the welcome porch principles that come to mind. Another is assuring to students that, we're essentially personally inviting, that we like our students. And we demonstrate that by celebrating the diversity of our classroom. And we celebrate diversity of classroom by essentially making sure that we're always willing and creating space to kind of celebrate difference and the different cultures in our classrooms. Some people have, International Flag Day or International Food Day, and where students get to kind of share and talk about their cultures. We also consider, when we're dealing with younger students, our tone of voice, making sure that, and not just younger students, right? I think even like our older students can get the sense just by the tone of your voice if you are being personally inviting. Um, Consider also how well we know our students and connect with each of our students. Are we greeting them at the door when they come into our classrooms? Are we creating space and opportunities to really get to know our students on a personal level? Obviously, there's boundaries that need to be set, but asking students how their day is going, asking students, what they did, all of this creates a situation where students feel like we are personally inviting and that we care about them as people. They're not just products coming into the school.
Absolutely.
I think, we need to really consider our humanness. And I guess a kind of final welcome porch principle where that enables all students and people across differences to feel welcome in an environment of learning, or really any environment. This could be a work environment too, is that making sure that the space that you are sharing or learning in or working in together is physically and culturally inviting. Students, I think, thrive when they can recognize that an institution looks like them. So this really deals with the visuals that inform the learning environment. And so we can, cultivate a physically and culturally inviting classroom or workspace by including pictures of role models and or artists that essentially come from various backgrounds, the backgrounds that maybe parallel the backgrounds of our students. We have allyship flags for LGBTQIA2S+ folks. Our preferred pronouns are kind of visible so that students recognize that we have respect for that. I think those are some ways that we can essentially create or engage principles that are invitational, where students across differences feel welcome. And then there's a trust factor that's built there, and then students have a readiness to really learn from you.
Well, it's such extraordinary work, and it's such an important approach, and you can see just from what you're describing that impact that's able to take place, and impact for all students, not just one small subset who might share the same cultural background as their teacher, for example. So it's amazing work. Thank you for doing all of this. Unfortunately, we are just about out of time, but I always like to ask of all my guests, and I can only imagine when doing this work, and especially sometimes this might involve curriculum evolution and changes and so on and so forth, that there's got to be some tough days. And on those toughest of days, as a leader yourself, where do you turn to for strength or for inspiration, for the sense of being able to overcome, those giant obstacles that sometimes present themselves? Where do you turn to?
I try to turn inward. And one of the ways that I'm able to turn inward successfully is by finding stillness. I think it's particularly challenging when you are a developing professional, such as myself, and you're juggling multiple responsibilities. I think I'm really passionate about, as a business person, I'm thinking of myself and my value creation, and I want to make sure that I have a diversified skill set and that I'm using and profiting from those things. So it's hard sometimes in my life to find stillness, but I try to create a moment in every single day where I can just be still and in silence, and can really just turn the mirror inward and really ask myself really important questions, whether it be about obstacles that I'm facing, whether it be about uncertainties that I have, and really kind of sit in silence and kind of consider the global picture. I think that I guess some people might look at that and say, oh, well, they meditate, that's their thing. But I think it's meditating, but also like spiritually getting to a place where I can have conversations with myself and to be clear of all the noise, so that the conversations that I have with myself are authentic, are coming from as an objective place as possible, and of course, centering mental health and having like a professional to speak with is also never a bad idea. So yeah, those are some ways that I kind of try to honor myself and help get myself through really challenging moments. And it doesn't hurt to have a playlist of songs that are empowering. I start my days actually with mantras, positive mantras, whether I have a playlist of TikToks or little video reels on Instagram that are just inspirational, motivational speeches that get my mindset, elevated, and I'm in a positive place. I do the same thing in the evenings as well. I make sure that I go to bed, even after a long, crazy day where there may have been drama, there may have been challenges, where I'm like making sure that I have time to sit in stillness, meditate, and put into my brain positive, elevated mindset, so that when I go to bed, that's what I'm like ruminating on. I'm not kind of like reinforcing or harping on any of the negative things that are happening.
That is awesome and truly amazing. Christopher Sierra, you absolutely are one of the arts engines who is powering human creativity in our world. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.